You know, I was listening to that song, and I get emotional every time I hear it because it was the song that was played at my dad's funeral. My dad passed after a tragic accident, sailing accident in June of 2009. He just left one morning, just like he normally did, and we're not really sure what happened. But he fell off the boat, and several hours later, they found him just like on the surface of the water. And I got frantic calls from my mom, and she said, "I don't know what we're going to do, but we just lost Dad today." And you can imagine, right, what that was like for the family. We all, of course, dropped everything. We went out to Florida where my parents lived, and some relatives came over from the Netherlands, and friends came, and there was such care and kindness shown to our family during that season. And one of the most gracious things that was done was that several staff members from the church I was serving in Missouri came out to Florida to be with us. And my creative arts pastor at the time played this song, "Be Near," at the close of the funeral. And I will never forget it. And every time I hear that song, my eyes well up with tears. I have, like, how am I going to get into this message? He had planned the song before he knew the story. And I was like, okay, I guess we're going to go all the way there. And then I thought, you know what? It actually fits beautifully. Because today we're going to talk a little bit about graciousness. And I think you guys already get this at a pretty deep level. As I've been getting to meet people and talk to people, I have heard story after story where people have said something like, "If it weren't for North River, I don't know where I would be." I can't even count the number of times I've already heard that. And then I hear about all the other things that you guys are doing with the Go team and the care team and the prayer team and the Deacons Fund. And it's just like you're already in this very grace-giving place. In fact, it's one of the things that I've been most attracted to about this church. And it's not just something that you've done for others, you've done it for me. So right here, just a couple of pictures of various things that people have done. They've opened up their home to me. They've let me borrow their cars. They've brought over meals. And it's just been so good. I've been so spoiled. And it's not just for me. It's also, you've done it for Carol. You've sent her messages, sent her texts. And the good news is that she's so taken by your kindness, she's going to be coming up here in 2 weeks just to make sure it's real. And so that's one of the reasons why we've changed the date for the one we had to cancel. You know that the potluck and the game night, we had to cancel that because of the weather. And so we're going to do it on the weekend she's here. So you have a whole new reason now to put that on your calendar. February 28th, Saturday night, we're going to be gathering here. You're like, oh, well, if we're getting a chance to see Carol, let's come. You know? We can see you anytime, Pete, but we'll come and see Carol. And it's just so moving to me that this graciousness that we are going to talk about today is already very evident in this church. It's part of your heart. And sometimes because you're so close to it, you don't realize how special and unique it is. Because the fact of the matter is that when we actually go out of here into the quote-unquote real world, people experience something very different. It looks a whole lot more like this.
Where are the bells for this track? Why is there one brand new tough call. They're so different.
Something funny?
Oh. No, nothing's, it's just that both those belts look exactly the same to me, I'm still learning about this stuff and,
This stuff? Oh, okay, I see. You think this has nothing to do with you. You go to your closet and you select, I don't know, that lumpy blue sweater, for instance, because you're trying to tell the world that you take yourself too seriously to care about what you put on your back, but what you don't know is that that sweater is not just blue, it's not turquoise, it's not lapis, it's actually cerulean. And you're also blithely unaware of the fact that in 2002, Oscar de la Renta did a collection of cerulean gowns, and then I think it was Yves Saint Laurent, wasn't it, who showed cerulean military jackets. I think we need a jacket here. And then cerulean quickly showed up in the collections of 8 different designers. And then it filtered down through the department stores and then trickled on down into some tragic casual corner where you no doubt fished it out of some clearance bin. However, that blue represents millions of dollars and countless jobs. And it's sort of comical how you think that you've made a choice that exempts you from the fashion industry when in fact you're wearing a sweater that was selected for you by the people in this room from a pile of stuff.
You see, that's the world that we step into, isn't it, after we leave church? When you wake up tomorrow, that's the kind of thing that you all have to process. That's the kind of reaction that you'll get to your stepping into that world. And I don't understand it all, but there are people who seem to take great pleasure in being cruel, being mean, and dismissive. And when you are in that space where you're experiencing that kind of reaction, what goes on in your own heart? Well, I'll assume that maybe you feel a little bit like me. We do 2 things. We coil back and we live in shame, or we react and we say, oh yeah, you think you got something? And then we come back with something bitter and resentful, and all that graciousness that we can display at church somehow gets lost in the mix of everyday life. And that's what causes us such hardship. Because one thing is for sure, we will not react lukewarmly. Well, you don't know the word lukewarmly? Tia, do we have to inform them of what this word is? Go ahead, tell them what lukewarmly means. Go ahead, stand up, just tell them. These old people, we just don't know, some of us. What does lukewarmly mean? All right, so thank you. We are now going to go home with a bit more vocabulary. You can now use this in your everyday life. Lukewarmly is not how we typically react when we are faced with the harshness of our everyday life, right? Now, what I'm doing in this series is I'm suggesting that there are virtues that we are trying to grow in as believers. So there's a certain joy that comes from becoming more, and last week we talked about courage. There's a joy in becoming more courageous. It's not easy in this world. And I suggested that in order for us to become more courageous, we have to deal with the fear that often sets us back. And courage is, in fact, in many ways, the foundational virtue, because if we don't have the intestinal fortitude to be courageous enough to do something here or there, then we're not going to develop any kind of virtue. So that's where we started. Now today, I want to talk about this growth in graciousness. That in our world, we need to see more graciousness, and it's hard against the harshness and the disrespect that we often feel in our everyday life. So I'm not going to suggest that it is an easy thing for us to do. But I'm also going to suggest that it may be the most important thing we do. You'll probably recognize this image. That's right. Yeah, I'm not going to do the eye roll moment where I pretend you haven't already thought about this, because you already have. You think about this a lot, but this image is a very familiar image. It's called the Tank Man. The actual identity of the person in this picture is unknown. It was a photo taken in June 5th of 1989. Some of you might remember this. It is a photo that was taken after the demonstration in Tiananmen Square by protesters who were trying to promote democracy in China, and it was shut down. And the next day, there were a series of tanks that made their way to Tiananmen Square, and this man stood in front of the tanks, and every time it tried to get around him, he just kind of moved. And this photo was taken by a Western journalist at a hotel in Beijing. It's an infamous photo, but nobody knows who this man is. Despite the efforts of human rights groups and journalists, nobody has been able to find him. Some assume that maybe he was executed. Others think he just kind of lived his life in anonymity. But the thing is, it remains this symbol of courageous graciousness. I love this particular statement. For years, the image has become a global symbol of individual courage and nonviolent resistance against overwhelming state power. And while it is one of the most recognizable photos in the world, it remains heavily censored in mainland China. Now, here's the question I want to pose. How many of you believe, and you don't have to raise your hand, but just like in your heart, how many of you believe that this one act of courageous graciousness has a better shot of dealing with the harshness in this world and all the get-evenism that we see out there? How many of you think that might be true? Maybe the more important question is, how many of you would like to be that guy? I would. I know I'm not there yet. I know I have some grace in me, but I'm not sure I have that kind of graciousness. And so I too find myself in a position where I'm saying, like, Lord, I want to know the joy of becoming more gracious. And so the question that we're faced with today is, what is the key linchpin challenge point to becoming more gracious? Last week we said, hey, the key linchpin challenge point with courage is fear. What do you think is the linchpin challenge point with becoming more gracious? And I don't think it's as obvious as what we were talking about last week, because I believe that what stands in the way of growth and graciousness is our pride. And you might be like, well, I'm not sure how that plays out. Well, just think about this for a minute. When you see something on social media, or you get an email that just kind of distresses you, or you're just in a conversation and you get hooked, what is it that hooks you? Like what troubles you, and why are you troubled about it? And I think at the end of the day, what we'll discover is that what troubles us is that our ego or our pride has been hurt. We've been offended by something. In fact, let me just give you a couple examples. When you find yourself saying something like, well, that wasn't fair. Why do you, like, what got hooked? Well, because I didn't deserve it. Or, I didn't like how they said that. What got triggered? Well, that's not me. How could they do that? Well, what's behind the offense? Well, that hurt my feelings. Right? We have those reactions, and things get stuck inside us, and we're like, I don't want to be that way. I don't want to react that way. And if we do, then what do we have to deal with? Our pride. Now, here's the thing that I think may get stuck along the way, and that is that sometimes when we're in this position, we say things like, yeah, I wish I just was more gracious here. I just was more gracious here. But I'm not sure that's the right way to think about it. Because when you are a follower of Jesus, you already have grace in your heart, grace in your life. And that's one of the best parts of becoming a Christian. I know some of you are still trying to sort that out. But when you become a follower of Christ, there is a grace that takes hold of your heart. And that heart is then filled with grace, and you want to share it, but pride becomes this wall that hinders the grace at work in us. And so if we're going to deal with our pride, the beauty is that when we start dealing with the pride, that the grace that's already in us has a chance to be fully released. Because this is what Jesus said, and it's really kind of I find it a very challenging passage. It's part of the Sermon on the Mount, Matthew 5. He says, I tell you this, do not resist an evil person. If anyone slaps you on the right cheek, turn to them the other cheek also. And if anyone wants to sue you and take your shirt, hand over your coat as well. And if anyone forces you to go 1 mile, go with them 2 miles. Okay. That's a hardship, right? Now, I'm going to suggest that I don't understand all the implications of that passage, but I do think that it raises the bar, doesn't it? It just kind of raises the bar on what my response needs to be in the middle of a harsh world. And one of it is that I need to deal with whatever it is that keeps me from being closer to that. Now, let me be clear on this. I am not suggesting that means we just say, it doesn't matter if people are unkind. Like, we should just let people roll over us. I'm not suggesting that. But what I am saying is that there is a way of Christ that allows graciousness to be flowing from us in a way that truly can change the world if we allow God to do a work on our pride. And so what I'm going to suggest, and I'm going to kind of build a case for this for the remaining time together, is that I believe that our pride is manifested in 3 primary ways. And I'm not going to suggest these are the only ways or that this is the only thing at work, but I am going to say that I think for each one of us, if we're going to get serious about dealing with pride, we're going to have to look at these 3 things. And the way that I'd like us to imagine it is that it's like a wall over our hearts. Like there's a wall that's kind of been protecting us. It's kind of a wall that we've created so that we're not hurt by the world. But it's also the wall that keeps the grace that's within our hearts at bay. And so it requires like our taking one brick out at a time in order to let the grace that is within us to be shared with the world. And so the 3 manifestations are this. Number 1, we have in our pride the pedestal. Pride shows itself as a pedestal. It is the air of superiority. It's that thing inside us that says, I know more. I'm better than you. And maybe even subtly we think, it's my way or the highway. We all, in certain situations, especially when we are being attacked and hearing stuff from the world, we kind of get our dyers up and we're like, ugh. And that's why Paul says in Romans 12:3, don't think yourself better than you are, Be honest in your evaluation of yourselves. Measure yourself by the faith that God has given you. You know what I think is behind this tendency towards feeling like we're superior is actually the opposite. We feel insecure. Like we feel less than, and therefore we have to puff ourselves up, make ourselves bigger than we are in order to let nobody find out how insecure we feel. And one of the beauties of being able to say, hey, I'm not going to live that way. I'm not going to do that kind of thing. I'm going to say, all right, hey, I'm going to learn to be okay in the same way that Paul describes here in Romans 12. Because notice what Paul says. He says, having an accurate assessment of yourself. It's not like what we often think. Think less of yourself, you're a nobody, you're a nothing. That's not what Paul is saying. He's saying instead, hey, understand you have a way about you. You have a personhood that's of value. Just don't make yourself bigger than you are. Take the brick of superiority and set it aside. Get off the pedestal. Here's how I think it plays out for me, at least. Pride says, I'm right and you are wrong. Graciousness says, we both need mercy. One of the things that happens when you deal with pride is the old adage becomes really clear to you that all ground is level at the foot of the cross. Every single one of us need grace. So that's the first manifestation of pride. Second manifestation, the second block I want to talk about is the shield. This is about saving face. We keep this block in place because we're afraid that if we look weak or we admit we're faulty, that we will lose our influence. So this is all about defensiveness, right? So the pedestal is all about trying to prove that we're right. This is about the other side of that equation where we feel defensive. You know, one of the things I've noticed is that as a pastor, and maybe you feel this even as a Christian in the workplace, is that if you admit you might not have everything together, you're going to lose credibility. And so we kind of have to keep our defenses up. Like I have to keep my mask in place. I have to make sure that I look as though I have it all together. I can never show a weakness. I can never admit a fault. Because if I do, then people will say, oh, and I thought you were a Christian. But you know what I've discovered? The opposite is actually true. When you are willing to admit you have some faults, if you're willing to say, hey, I don't have it all figured out either, you don't lose credibility, you gain it. People are like, oh, like it's okay to admit that you aren't all perfect and you have everything. Yeah, I don't. And there's something beautiful about being able to say, like out loud, I didn't get that right. I'm sorry. I should have done better on that. And all of a sudden, right, the shield comes down, the defensiveness comes down. I think this is the outplaying of what James talked about. God opposes the proud, but he shows favor to the humble. And then third is the gavel. The final block is maybe the most challenging of all because it is about the willingness to relinquish control. It's about freeing yourself from the exhaustion of having to try and make sure everybody else gets it right. Now, it's interesting to me when we start dealing with these various blocks, if we deal with the need to feel superior and we deal with this need to defend our reputation, all of a sudden this last block, if we really are kind of working through those processes, we can start experiencing the not yet fully realized grace that gives us a reason to change the atmosphere. It gives us a reason to be able to say, you know what, I don't have to be the final arbiter of all this. I can put this in God's hands. I think that was James' point in James 4:12. There's only one lawgiver and judge, the one who is able to save and destroy. But who are you to judge your neighbor? In fact, setting aside the gavel is, I think, in some ways, the most tenacious act of trust. Because it frees you from the exhaustion to having to prove that you're right and everyone else is wrong, so that your focus can be on giving favor and graciousness when that is what the world desperately needs. So what does this one look like? Pride says, I need to prove that they are wrong. I need to make sure that they got it right. And graciousness says, I trust God to be the judge. You see, when we are effective and we are tenacious about pulling these blocks aside to say, I'm going to do some serious business dealing with the pride in my life. I'm going to pull that aside. We're going to pull this aside. I'm going to pull that aside. You know what happens? We are fully released at that point to give the grace that the world is desperately longing for. And it changes everything. It's like it becomes that attraction factor where people say, I want what you have. There's something about the way you are in the world. It's so attractive to me. And you find yourself saying, well, it's not really me. It's this grace that God has put in my heart that I feel responsible to sharing with the world. In 1947, Corrie ten Boom was traveling through Germany. She was preaching on the necessity of forgiveness. And after a service that she gave in Munich, she saw a man making his way to her through the crowd, and she recognized him instantly. He wasn't just any man. He was one of the cruelest guards at the prisoner of war camp where she was housed during World War II. He was a man that stood at the showers. I want you to imagine this, mocking the prisoners. And as he approached Corrie at the end of the service, all her preaching felt hollow. Her heart froze, and the man reached out his hand and said, a fine message, Fräulein. How good it is to know that, as you say, all our sins are at the bottom of the sea. And then he told her that since the war, he had become a Christian. And he knew he had done horrible things. And he was there to ask for her forgiveness. Now, I want you to imagine this moment. Because right there in that moment, Corrie had to do what I've been challenging us to do. She had to take block by block by block of her pride in order to let the grace flow to this man. Think about it. She had to start by dismantling her air of superiority. Because in that moment, she felt morally superior. She was the victim. He was the monster. And she had to realize in that moment that she too was actually a sinner. And that she needed the same grace that she had just been preaching about. She had to step off the pedestal of the righteous Savior to stand on the ground of shared brokenness. And then she had to deal with the shield of defensiveness. Because she was this famous speaker on forgiveness. She had a reputation to uphold. If she refused to forgive him, she would be seen as a hypocrite. So she had to set aside her shield because she also felt like if she appeared weak, she would hurt those who had suffered alongside of her. And so she had to admit in that moment, Lord, I can't do this in my own strength. And so she prayed a simple prayer right there in that moment. Lord, I cannot forgive him. Give me your forgiveness. And then finally, she had to set aside the gavel of judgment because she had every legal, moral right to judge him. She really did hold the gavel over his life. And she had to realize that she had to lay it down. And by choosing to thrust her hand into his, that one toxic memory of tragedy and hurt was transformed into radical redemption. Later, she wrote about the experience in this way. She said, I've never known God's love so intensely as I did then. Forgiveness is an act of the will, and the will can function regardless of the temperature of the heart. So, friends, we've talked today about this wall of pride. And we've looked at the pedestal of superiority, the shield of our defensiveness, the gavel of our judgment. And at the same time, I think we all have this core desire to be the gracious influence in the world that the world desperately needs. And so in this closing moment of the service, I'm going to ask you to do your own business with God. My guess is that as I've been talking about this, there's been some things come to mind, like maybe some relationships, some issues, some challenges, where you realize, you know what, I wasn't as gracious as I could have been. I let pride get in the way. And so Galen's going to sing a song, and as normally we'll stand and sing the song, but I'm going to invite you just to kind of sit in your seat and read the words as they're sung. And let it wash over you. Let it become a kind of prayer for you, where this becomes like a stake you put in the ground, and you say, okay, Lord, I hear you. I hear what you're saying to me. I'm ready to do some business with you. Help me, because this is going to be hard. But in the same way that Corey talked about what a release it was to be able to do what she did in that moment, maybe you'll discover the same in this moment. So, Lord, do your good work.